I'm Dave, and this is Rita McCormick. We are here to share our journey through the darkness of depression, anxiety, and PTSD in our 13-year marriage together.
No, we were not. We did not have love at first sight. Actually, I avoided him for about 6 months and went straight to Pastor Duke to check him out.
The beauty is Duke poured the gasoline on the fire because he knew what was going on. Behind the scenes, Rita basically, she was just looking for some help. She had a bad back at the time too, right? Mm-hmm. Her back was, so she needed some help getting a handicapped girl to church here. And I'll never forget when I turned and I looked, I saw Christ, I saw Jesus in this woman that I had never met before. And immediately I was just attracted to that.
Basically started off the whole conversation with, don't get any ideas, I'm never gonna marry again.
So, and I had no idea why she felt like that. I didn't, at that point in our relationship, I had no idea that she had clinical depression. I knew that a little bit that she had gone through somewhat of a challenging divorce, but I had no idea what depression looked like really even in those, even though I had suffered myself mostly from what I call situational depression. I had no idea. But even at that point in time, I walked away that day saying, okay, all right, God, I knew she was the one at that point in time. God said, you know what? I got something. I'm going to take beauty out of the ashes, and I'm going to make something new for both of you. And I didn't grasp that at all.
We did little things here and there with the church and outside of church. And my mother kept telling me, you're never going to get married again because nobody wants an old-fashioned woman like you. He kept saying that he prayed for an old-fashioned godly woman. And I was like, well, you're going to get the answer to those prayers. We got married and dated well within an 11-month period. I guess I'll have to say our wedding, nothing was traditional about our service. I came down the aisle to the song, It's All About You, Jesus.
We wanted Jesus lifted high that day. We knew, the two of us knew that the only reason we were there was because of him.
I have struggled with clinical depression since my early 20s. It's encompassed many hospitalizations, usually on an annual basis, sometimes more.
We had 8 pretty solid years of depression not really raising its ugly head, and then through a series of events it just kind of crashed.
I have had many medication changes. Medication is a really big thing when you have clinical depression. It's kind of like tweaking everything, and it's not an exact science. Not only medication, I've had counseling. We've had counseling together as a couple.
There was so much that happened in those 5 years. 4 hospitalizations. Rita said multiple medication changes, electroconvulsive therapy. That combination of things in this short window of time just like blew up the anxiety and the depression, and it was 5 years of tweaking and counseling and to really to get to the other side.
I don't know how I got through. I think God just said, I'm not finished with you. Christ became a faithful friend. I was married to someone who did not have the belief system that I had as a Christian. I basically am a domestic violence survivor. I had 25 years of it. Basically, I sought help from Wellspring in Saratoga. It's a not-for-profit organization that helps out domestic violence victims. So, and as a result of the many years of help that I got from them, Dave and I have decided to give 50% of the portion of our proceeds from the book to Wellspring.
We're selfish people, right? We can really be selfish individuals. And what God did by giving me Rita as my wife, he took my heart and he gave me such compassion, first for her. I had no understanding what unconditional love was, what it really meant. I thought I did. I thought that was what the cross was all about, and it was. But in my life, I never truly understood how I was supposed to give that unconditional love out. The more I began to understand her story, and the more because it's not like one day Rita just told me the story. Survivors can't just tell your story. They can't. They can't just open up and say, here's my whole story, here's what happened. So as I would get bits and pieces over a period of time, God would just soften my heart and just give me compassion that I never knew I had. And then he nudged my heart and continued to nudge it, and he still is to this day, to speak up and to be the voice for folks that are going through, right? Not just the PTSD and the trauma parts, but the whole package. I've seen that bad fruit of the stigma right here at Newtown. The single biggest mistake we make as Christians when we're trying to help those that are suffering, we want to tell them that they need more prayer, they need more Jesus, right? They need to be in the Word. If they do these things, then they won't be anxious, and the depression will go away. All that does is make the sufferer just want to crawl underneath a rock. It makes them feel that they're broken. Right? We're all broken, we know that. But it makes them feel like they don't fit with everybody else. The Church of Jesus should be the safest place for everybody. When they're judged, when that stigma sticks out and the fingers are pointed and saying, you know what, you just don't have enough faith. That's the destructive part of church, period. And this is all over the place. She told me she needed to go to the hospital. I was like, what do you mean? Why do you need to go to a mental health facility, a mental health hospital, when I'm so supportive? I love you unconditionally. I do whatever. I thought I was her savior. It was hard. The first 2 times that happened, I really struggled with that notion. And thank God that she has always had the ability to know when she needed to go there. Mm-hmm.
Dave has come to a better understanding of what it's like for someone that has this illness, particularly the PTSD, because that is the one thing for me that is the most stressful, because when it happens, I don't know where I am, what I'm doing. I'm usually just crouched in a corner. And he's been able to talk me out of them, where he'll tell me today's date, it's the present tense, and he'll just say it over and over and over again.
There's a chapter called The Christmas Surprise, and we were decorating our first Christmas trees together as a married couple. And Rita had this star that we were incorporating into the tree that she had previous, and I was trying to put that star on top of the Christmas tree, and it wasn't working out too well. So I started acting like a child. All of a sudden I realized that she was dead silent, right? Just total silence. I was up in a ladder and I came down and I realized her back was completely turned in the other direction from me, and she was now at this point she started to sob and began rocking back and forth, and that was her first experience. That was my Christmas surprise that year. There's no manual that tells you how to deal with PTSD. I'd never seen it in my entire life. I had never witnessed it. I'd never been part of it. But I think what the Holy Spirit just said, you know what, comfort her, tell her it's okay. Alls I could figure to say was, Rita, it's okay. It's 2008. It's 2008. I kept telling her over and over and over. And for about 60 seconds, she wasn't there, and she came back, and she had no recollection of what happened. And that was my first experience with it.
What people need to remember about people with mental health issues is, and they should be remembering this when they're dealing with anyone. You don't know what other people's stuff is, or what they're dealing with, or what's going on in their life. You should be kind, not judgmental, because that person could be on the verge of a mental health breakdown. They could be on the verge of suicide. They could be on the verge of just about anything. I tend to be more standoffish until I can trust them. But a lot of people think, that I'm being self-centered or, rude or whatever. It's like, what's wrong with her? She's not talking, But until I can trust them, or feel comfortable in that setting, I'm not saying anything. And not that everybody's like that, because there's a lot of extroverts, but you really shouldn't judge anyone for any particular reason, because you never know what's going on in their life.
I think in our case, we grew up, both of us grew up in that religious setting, that it wasn't about a relationship. It was religion. We were taught that from a very early age that God's going to punish you. I can still hear my mother's voice over and over and over as I was a kid. Right? It was always, God's going to punish you. Right? That was ingrained in where we came from, right? Mm-hmm. Both of us. Where we came from led us to believe that God was going to condemn us. Once you feel that you're such a mess that God couldn't possibly love me, right? That's when then Satan just comes in. Remember right. Job's friends, right? Job, they weren't very good friends. Their advice was pretty poor, and it's kind of the advice that religious setting that we came from.
I felt like I was being punished for past sin, or for just not being good enough. Most of my childhood into my adulthood, I've always dealt with the issue of perfection. And I felt that if I was good enough in any situation, there wouldn't be anger, there wouldn't be turmoil, there wouldn't be crying, there wouldn't be bad stuff. If I wasn't perfect, then, my parents were going to fight more, or, my ex-husband was going to, do things that I would regret later.
It was, you had to go through your certain sacraments, and you had to say so many prayers to be forgiven, and then there still wasn't a guarantee you wouldn't end up someplace at the end that people would have to pray you out of. That spilled over into how we thought we were supposed to do life. So, right. So in your case, I think that just spilled over into a works-based marriage. Your marriage would be better, right, if you performed at a higher level.
The reason everything went on for so long, for like 25 years, is because of that religious guilt telling me that I had to stay wed for the rest of my life, until death do us part, regardless of the violence that was going on a daily basis.
I think Christian churches need to talk about this issue. We need to talk about depression. We need to acknowledge that this is an illness. This is common. We need to educate. And I am not trying to offend anybody, but this needs to come from the pulpit. Right? There needs to be support in terms of recognizing this as an illness versus a sin issue. People suffering from anxiety, depression, PTSD, that stigma, that stigma says in our society they must have done something, right? They must have done something that they must have sinned, right? Especially in the Christian. I've heard it so many times. If they're suffering from depression, they must have done something that caused that depression.
Or they don't have enough faith, or they're not praying enough. They don't have a relationship with Jesus. They're too weak.
Philippians, be anxious for nothing, right? But in everything with prayer and supplication. I cannot tell you how many people that I spoke with that were told that verse. You just need to camp out on this verse. You know what? If you camp out on this verse right here, God will remove your anxiety. Yes, anxiety and depression can be a byproduct of sin. We know that. But not all depression is related to sin. It's
right.
In Rita's case, she was suffering the results of somebody else's sin and addictions. This isn't a choice. We need to stop talking so much as a sin issue. As a congregation, we need to talk about this in particular. It is so rampant right now after 2020, after COVID, after everything. I've worked for 40 plus years in the retail. I've never seen a world so anxious, so troubled, so alone and sad and frustrated. And you know what? People that are dealing with this, they need love and compassion. We've known for 13 years, if God had chosen to completely heal Rita, he could do that. We know that. He hasn't chosen to do that, right? So he's given us this ministry, right, to speak up, to be the voice, right? Mm-hmm. We could cave, right, to the pressures that we've dealt with. We could wave our finger at God and blame him, right? Or we embrace what he has done with us. There is victory in Jesus in this, because we're still here together to talk about this, right? She hasn't gotten to the point where suicide was an option, right? And it happens. It definitely happens out there. And we're not gonna stop that from happening if we don't talk about it.
The deepest and darkest part, I felt, maybe not weak, but I felt alone, because I felt if God truly loved me, I wouldn't be going through this. But I knew, when I came out of it, that was a lie from Satan, that he was just messing with my head and trying to get me to go down the deep end. But I never gave up, because I knew God had better things for me to do. And I'm actually a stronger person today for what I've been through and, where I've come from and what I've learned over the last 30, 40 years of my life. I wouldn't change it, because I wouldn't be who I am today without it. And now I can help others.
About 4 years ago, God decided to tell me to write a book. And I said, okay. But you know, God, I got a 65 on my English. my English exam. I barely passed English, so I'm really not a writer. So I wrote 3 or 4 pages at the time, and I actually lost them. I lost the file, put it away, and I said, see, God, told you. I told you I'm not a writer. Truth of the matter was 4 years ago, Rita was in no spot to share our story. When the pandemic blew up this past year, he kind of just nudged me and nudged me and nudged me, and I finally said, okay, right, we'll do it. He's called us, there's no doubt in our minds that he's called us to share our journey through PTSD, through depression, anxiety, and PTSD, and to help others to be a voice that helps stop the stigma. He's just ingrained that big time in my heart. And then he had to convince her that it was okay to share the story.
It was through Dave's eyes that this is written. And to hear what another person has to say about you can be a little intimidating. But as I read more and more of the book, it was learning and growing that this man actually loved me unconditionally. And I've never heard anyone in all my years ever say the things that he said to me in that book and dedicated it. It just was, I was speechless. I couldn't say anything. God had truly blessed me. It felt overwhelming for him to write this book because it was so much information all at the same time on this piece of paper, and I'm just like, this is my life. And I have not shared my life with, or I have shared my life with very few people. For the silent sufferers, I would say, or even people that are not in silence with their families and friends, and have depression, clinical depression, or anxiety disorders, I would say don't give up. With determination, possible medication changes, with support and counseling, you can lead a normal life, because I'm an example of that. There is another side to the valley. I've been there, and actually I'm there right now. And you can get there. One of the things we had wanted to point out, and I think we did a little bit, that there are different types of depression. They're seasonal and situational, and those tend to correct themselves within a short or long period of time, depending on the situation. There's also clinical depression, which I have, and bipolar depression, which is also a clinical depression. It doesn't go away. Medication, support, counseling will help it to get a little better, and sometimes a lot better, and people never deal with it again. But there's always that risk, and there's always that chance. I've learned to live with it. I know it's not going away, but I know that I've been through it before, and I'll get through it again. And with the support that I've built up around myself, with my church family, my pastors, I'll get through it. And it's not the end of the world.
Kind of advice to what I give to the spouse of someone that's suffering and going through these cycles. Sometimes they seem like they're never ending. Don't give up. God is faithful. God has never left us. Truth of the matter is the darkest days of, especially the 5-year battle, the darkest days is when we are the closest to Christ. When we're on top of that mountain and we're looking down and everything is looking beautiful, I'm enjoying the downtime from this illness. And when it comes, it just draws us to Him, you know? And that's, without that, I don't know how we would have done this for 13 years. It would have destroyed our marriage. I think there's not a doubt in my mind. If we didn't feel the presence of Christ in this battle, it would have just selfishness, the opposite of love. isn't hate, it's selfishness. And my selfishness would have definitely, come through. It is hard. It's hard. It's hard, but it's worth every moment of the support, right? The time that we put into each other's lives. You're called to it. If you're the spouse, it's a calling. I mean, God knew I needed a helper, so he gave me her. But on that flip side, he gave me to her to be her helper, to get her through this. And we're called. This isn't, you don't bail, right? You get on your knees, you support, you learn, you ask God, right? Well, what do I do? A lot of days I didn't know what to do, But over a period of time, God he's given me the wisdom to deal with it. He's given me the heart to fight. I will never forget the first time she was in the hospital, and I was really struggling bad. I was sad. I was lonely. I couldn't understand why God would allow this. And I remember coming here by myself, and it might have been the very first time I'd ever been to Newtown alone at a service. And I got through the service, and the last worship song to play was "It Is Well With My Soul," and I lost it. There's 400 or 500 people, and they are singing. They're just blasting it out, and I just lost it. The tears started pouring down. And I remember looking up saying, God, it's not well. All's not well with my soul. It's not. And that was the first of 4 hospital visits. By the time we got to the 4th hospital visit in 5 years, when I drove Rita to that facility, I had a peace and a comfort that just poured over me, that knew all was well with my soul. I knew that she needed to go there. I knew that by going there, she was going to get the best health care that our area could provide, that she was going to get the best counselors, that they were going to look at her medications, that they were going to do what they needed to do. I left that facility with such a peace and comfort in my heart. Okay. It took me 5 years, but we got there. Transitioning from hospitalizations into talking with the pastors, I think that we're really truly blessed. We've had the unique opportunity here to have had relationships with multiple pastors over the last
20 years.
20 years. We've had some sort of relationship with everyone. And originally, Pastor Duke was the first guy in terms of I think the first hospital visit. And I don't know, there was this transition to Pastor Matt.
Right. The first thing we would do when I would be hospitalized was to find out about the visitation, and I always wanted to see the pastor.
Yeah.
Because of the support and the prayers from the church and the pastors, because I knew that prayer was the best medicine for what was going on. Pastor Duke, we were very close with in the beginning of our relationship, but then as lead pastors changed, the other pastors had known our story and were very much available for counseling. And then it got to a point where when I was in the hospital, I'd be like, no, I want to talk with Pastor Matt, or no, I want to talk with this person. I was very fortunate to have, and very blessed to have, a lot of support from friends and pastors. And I would pull on that support. I pulled on it because I knew that I could lean hard into that, and that I would get there. Between God and my pastors and some friends, I would get there some way, somehow. It would just all work together for the good.
We had left Newtown for a little while because God had called us up there. I think that was the biggest transition probably. God called us to go up the Northway for a few years, and Rita's health had gotten so bad physically, and in addition to the mental illness, the wrong medication actually created havoc on her physical illness, and we made a choice, or we felt God was leading us back, and I'll never forget, I met with Pastor Matt, and we talked about coming back, and I know you just opened up your arms wide and said, "Come on back, man." It was like we never left. We were home.